They were for David.
No, they're like.
Obed-Edom mentioned in 2 Samuel, is that the same in 1 Chronicles as the gatekeeper?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. I'd have to dig into it.
Okay. So I've always wondered that. I mean, timing kind of
It's easy to look it up in concordance and see if that name shows up multiple times, where it shows up. So it may be that you have somebody unnamed in one text and named in another text, but
yeah. I mean, I've looked into it somewhat, and it suggested that it was just because it said Obed-Edom was a Philistine, but then it wouldn't necessarily be the same Obed-Edom because to be in the presence of the ark, you have to be a Levite. But then other sources say like it is Obed-Edom, but he just lived in that region, which is why David would trust him with the ark for 3 months.
Oh, okay.
And it's all sorts of, I don't know, it's just, I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, I haven't studied that one.
I think I can make this bigger, so let me try it.
Go ahead.
This part, some people use Jesus had them not the messenger.
Yeah, the problem is you lose the two-page display.
Okay. Try it.
A little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could figure out if I get rid of this, then I could lift it up, but I couldn't figure out how to get rid of that. Yeah. I'm not very good with tables.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, I think it's just right there
All right, do you think you have it or you need a little more time? 1 minute? Okay.
I was in my
All right, let's bring it back together and get your observations. So I'm making you SBSers here for a minute, right? I'm taking you a step deeper. This probably probably even deeper than SBSers normally go because they tend not to spend a lot of time in Chronicles. But so when you see this, and when you know one author is working from a text and using it, our objective now is to try to get inside the head of the chronicler, Ezra or whoever it is. The chronicler's got a copy of 2 Samuel sitting there and working with it. And what happened? What went on here? Can you explain it? Yeah.
He skips David's sin with Bathsheba and the family turmoil that was like a direct result of God's punishment for that sin.
Okay, so he skips the Bathsheba episode and some other episodes, right? Yeah.
You know, he skips the famine and even the killing of Saul's sons, and then also skips the rescue of David at the hands of the Philistines. To portray them being stronger and a better man than what Samuel does. Skips his weakness and his failures and his sins.
Skips his weakness and his failures and his sins. That's a remarkable statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
You agree with that? Can you see how the chronicler did it? It was very simple. A pair of scissors. Right? Snip. Can you see it? Right here. Snip. Then one little other piece. Snip. 10 chapters. Right? And this works, by the way. If you go with how Chronicles does this, you have a continuous narrative about the Philistines. It's actually a pretty good editing job, isn't it? It does work together. It ties together this idea of Rabbah, the siege of Rabbah, the Ammonites, and the crown, and all that sort of stuff. So, in other words, this is an intelligent editing job. You're getting rid of distracting stories to get a continuous story about this business going on in Rabbah, and the whole crown and Milcom and all that stuff. But you are doing it intentionally at the expense of 10 chapters, roughly. And the 10 chapters is full of crap. Right? That's the Revised Smith version. Right? The 10 chapters is full of crap. The worst days of David's life. Snip. Gone. The result is very important, isn't it? Because, of course, now you want to ask, it's one thing to say what. That's the what. And we can fairly well say how, namely snip, right? But then there's the why question. Why would the chronicler do that? What do you think?
Because they already know the story of Bathsheba and everything because they've read Kings. And so they need to be inspired by the good example of David's victories and the other impressive things that he did. Instead of
But they already have that too.
Well,
I'm following through your logic. If you're going to say, well, they already have those stories so they don't need it again, then why ever borrow anything from Samuel? You've already got that. Let me do something else. I got other sources.
because it fits into the theme of Chronicles better.
Well, you're the author of Chronicles. You tell me.
Well, to me, I just see it as more of an inspiration. It's
Okay.
to inspire the readers because they've just been sent back to Jerusalem.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Why? Yeah?
David was very good to the Levites during his time.
Oh, David was good to the Levites. So this is payback. Payback. David was good to Levites, so we're going to be good to him, and so we're going to cut out all the crap. Interesting. Okay. Other thoughts on the why? Yeah? What? Focus. Explain.
Well, he highlighted some thoughts, and he wants to direct people's attention to focus
To focus on what?
on what David did well. and
On what
so-
David did well.
So then we can follow what he did well.
Okay, so kind of the hope kind of thing. Yeah. There was you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you said that he's focusing on how the kings treated the priests, and then he's going to say, like she mentioned that they were like David. And so if you're going to make David the standard of a good king, like a living example, then you want to highlight what he just did well. Just focus on that. If
Okay.
you put in all the negatives, then people can say, but he was like this also, and it
Uh-huh.
will detract attention to what you want.
Yeah, okay, which is kind of your focus thing, right? Yeah, other thoughts, yeah?
So David designed the temple and made all the preparations for it. So maybe just kind of realigning, like if David was good and he designed the temple, and now we're going back to the temple, we need to follow David's footsteps and reestablish the temple.
Interesting. And one of the things a chronicler does is to build a closer relationship between David and the temple than you had in Samuel. It almost hints as if he was in on the building of it, you know, even though he's denied that. But he, you know, in 2 Samuel, you don't get that close, as close an association. Good. Okay. Any other thoughts?
It's just my opinion, but like I just saw like when you repent, God doesn't remember. It's not about author, but it's just my view. So he repented, and it's like it passed, like the time passed, and then I'm like, wow, there is no sin like in David, but actually he did, but like in God's side, he's like just clean man.
Okay, yeah. So kind of an almost a divine perspective in a way. Yeah.
I think like the writer of the Chronicles is trying to form a new identity with Israel, and I feel like in order to do that, he needs to focus on the positive rather than the negative, which was, you know, how they kind of Absalom trying to overthrow David's government. Well, that's what got Israel in trouble to begin with Jeroboam and stuff. So he's trying to almost not sweep under the rug, but kind of sweep under the rug, and just really making sure that the Israelites that moved back are really focusing on what was good about their ancestors rather than
Okay, good. I want to come back to this because I've told you already, one of the things I really appreciate about the Hebrews and about the Old Testament largely is the Hebrews are not afraid to tell about the weaknesses of their leaders. They're not afraid to sort of have a warts and all portrayal of their leaders and to talk about their leaders both as their accomplishments and their shortcomings. And there's a deep honesty there that you don't normally see in the ancient world. Well, of course, to the extent that I say that, this plays in the opposite direction. This then, if I follow through my own logic, here is a deep dishonesty. Right? He's cheating. He's snipping out all the bad stuff. Why do that? And I have to say, when I first figured this out, it was like, I don't like that. I'm a historian, right? I like all the evidence. Snipping out evidence, that's like illegal, right? People get thrown in prison to obstruction of justice. You know, this is obstruction of literature. I don't know. So that's my initial reaction. It's not my last reaction, but just to be fair, I think I would probably want to put that on the table. Without doubt, though, you're getting inside the head of the chronicler, aren't you? Right? You can see him at work. You can see the scissors at work. But if you look every single king, you're going to see the same process at work. You're going to see some word for word, you're going to see some snipping, and you're going to see some additions. And it's all going to be shaped according to a coherent whole. This guy's a good editor, pulls things together to make a coherent story. And it's going to change perspective with that Levitical emphasis as a result. So, with that in mind now, what I would like to do for the next few minutes, how are we going to do this? Okay. Let's go now. Oops. Just waiting for the opportunity to say that, huh? Just let me introduce you to a word. The word is hagiography. Hagiography. This is the study of large pigs. No, it's not. Hagios. You like that? So hagios in Greek means holy. So hagiography is the study of holy people. Often you'll hear about, in early Christian circles, saints' lives, the lives of the saints. That's hagiography, literally, lives of the saints. What we have going on here is the whitewashing of David. We have David going from 2 Samuel as a human being with lots of problems and the problems are being snipped away, and you're creating hagiography. You're making David a saint, right? You're only showing the good stuff. Now, from a historian's point of view, hagiography is useful, but hagiography is so biased that you know it's leaving stuff out too, and you always wonder what's it leaving out, right? But that is what's going on here. This is the making of a story that was not hagiography, and you're making it into hagiography by removing all the bad stuff, and then you are using David now as a saint. And that becomes a key concept, I think, for the intent of the chronicler. Obviously, this is by design, right? This didn't happen by accident. He snipped at a very particular place, right? This is all by design. He is whitewashing David. He is making David into a saint, and you might well ask why, right? I'm going to leave that question hanging because I want to see the bigger picture first, and then we'll come back to it, okay? So let's now go to the bigger flow of the text in terms of the kings of Judah. So you have already pointed out correctly that you have the same kings of Judah in the same order, the same chronology, all that a bunch of borrowing going on from 1st and 2nd Kings as we have seen. We have also seen the snipping going on. All the northern kings are snipped out, right? All the northern kings are snipped out, except for little bits and pieces where they pop into the story. But for the most part, this is only paying attention to Judah, not Israel. So we don't have to redo Judah now, or we don't have to redo Israel, but we do have to redo Judah. I just put for your reference our dates again. And I just have a list here of these kings. And what I want is your notes. What did you notice for these kings that is similar to and in particular different from? Right? How does the chronicler portray these kings differently from how they were portrayed in 1st and 2nd Kings? Any patterns that you noticed or details?
It's more detailed about some of them.
Okay.
And what, especially the good ones, what they are doing, but also when the opposite comes, what they are doing wrong.
Okay. So we get, in many cases, more details because remember, we have other sources available to this writer that were not available earlier, and so he fills in with some of these sources. For example, Asa. Asa gets 3 more pages. Mainly good stuff in Chronicles than he does in Kings, just as an example. So yes, there is definitely more detail. So it's not just a matter of snipping. He's not just reducing, he's also adding. And adding, of course, with a design. The same, this is all one master plan that's putting all these pieces together. Other things you noticed by way of comparison and contrast to Kings? About any of these kings?
I think the biggest was Manasseh. I mean, in Kings, he's a complete, the worst king ever. But in Chronicles, he's terrible in the beginning, but then by the end, after he repents, he's me personally reading it, I would consider him a good king.
Okay.
Plus he's repented.
This is a dynamic that enters into Chronicles that isn't there so much in Kings. So when you have, and I can talk about this from ancient writers, when they write biographies, there's kind of a habit among ancient biographers. And that is a person has a true character, but that true character sometimes takes time to be revealed. But eventually that person's true character is revealed. And you kind of get that in Kings, don't you? This person is a true character, and over time their true character is revealed. And they're either, a nice guy, but you don't know it right? This is the stuff of good movies, right? You get a good movie, you have the grumpy grandpa, right, who seems very nasty, and at the end you find out, he's got a soft spot, and his true character was this really decent guy underneath this gruff exterior, or whatever. Or you can get the opposite, that somebody fools you, that you think they're really good, and you find out actually they're the criminal at the end of the story. Oh, they're really a bad guy all along. That is, character is static, and the literature is written to slowly reveal the true character of the individual. Kings kind of goes more with that, doesn't it? But Chronicles actually rejects that concept to a large degree. And so you have this idea of Manasseh, who a lot of his life is doing bad stuff, but then he's got this repentant heart at the end. In other words, you're not stuck. You can change. Isn't that remarkable? I think I've been having this conversation with my daughter. We Americans tend to believe that we can identify people. There are certain kinds of people, and you're this kind of person. You know, you're the sociopath. You're the, you're a control freak. You're a homosexual. You're a whatever. And we often, by the way, in American culture, it has to do with sexuality, right? And that's who you are. And people even use that language. Well, I didn't know who I was for a long time, but then I really think I really am, a woman. I just don't have the right equipment, right? And so you become a Bruce Jenner. These are the kinds of things that we Americans tend to think. That is, we Americans tend to go more with the king's mentality. And I think that is deeply harmful. That kind of thinking is deeply harmful because it causes us to believe we're stuck. I am who I am, I cannot change. It seems to me at the very heart of the gospel is, who am I? Most fundamentally, who am I? I am either, there's really only three choices. I am either a random collection of atoms, going back into the dust soon, or I am a drop of meaning in the sea of karma, or I'm a child beloved of God. It's one of the three. Take your pick. I think most people in this room would say, fundamentally, I'm a child beloved of God. That's who I am. How do I behave based upon who I am? There's lots of variables there, aren't there? But however I behave, I'm not stuck. The only thing I'm stuck with is a Father who loves me, and that's pretty much okay. But otherwise, while it's hard, and I've got habits, and I've got tendencies, and I've got weaknesses, and I've got strengths, and they all play into how I behave, or how I think, or how I look at something, or what attracts me, or what repels me. But ultimately, all those things are variable. And ultimately, God can, in my life, transform those things by His power. I'm never stuck. Even Manasseh wasn't stuck. Right? Isn't that what the chronicler's saying? But also, you can go along your life and look pretty darn good, but demonstrate along the process a sin problem that's been gutting you from the inside, and ultimately you collapse. And Chronicles has that too, huh? Right, we have both. So that kings aren't just good or bad. Kings are in process, becoming gooder or badder. And so you have that nuance in Chronicles that you don't have in Kings, which is one of the things I appreciate. That makes a lot of difference, doesn't it? Thinking about who you are, really. I am not my sexuality. I am not my temptations. I am not my weaknesses. I am not my strengths. I'm a child beloved of God, who has given me certain gifts, to be sure. And I have plenty of weaknesses. But ultimately, I can go back to that fundamental identity, and there's real power there, at least in my mind. That's my pop psych for the day. Okay. So, anything else about these kings? If not, let me make a few rapid observations just to give you a sense of patterns. Abijah in Kings, he is guilty of committing the sins of his father, and therefore bad. In Chronicles, there's nothing but good. And in fact, he gives a speech as a champion of the Lord, and God gives him victory. Joash, in Kings, he's good. In Chronicles, he's also good, but then he turned bad because he usurped the authority of the priests. Right? You mess with the priests, you go bad. Azariah, in Kings, he is good. In Chronicles, I just did that one, didn't I? Let's see. Hezekiah. Chronicles hugely expands the account of Hezekiah, with emphasis, not only was Hezekiah good in terms of protecting Israel from the onslaught of Assyria, or Jerusalem, sorry, from the onslaught of Assyria, not only was Hezekiah good because he got rid of high places and all those kinds of things we talked about, what really makes Hezekiah good is he threw a great party. And who led the party? Levites on the temple, and he was the one who restored the Passover. And so there's this beautiful picture of ceremony and music and Levitical organization and this Passover being done, and the Levites and Hezekiah are all in this together. And so Hezekiah just gets really elevated because he worked so well with the priests and gave them the opportunity to do what they're good at, namely throw parties, right? Celebrations. Manasseh we already talked about. Josiah. Josiah is similarly portrayed in Chronicles, but the Levitical emphasis is on how did he actually manage those reforms. That is, who actually did all these things to clean up Israel? Guess who? Levites. And because of this, he is a really good guy. Let's see. That's enough. All right. Any other comments with respect to these kings? What?
So you think maybe there is a priest kind of history diary?
A priest with a diary?
Yeah, because how the Arthur knows the king King Jehoshaphat the priest well. So maybe he read something, some report between the priests.
Yeah, very possibly, very possibly. These sources, a lot of these sources that are named in the text, we don't know who wrote them. That some of them could be that kind of thing, that they would be priestly diaries or memoirs of things that have been going on among the priests and what they did a particular period of time. I think it's pretty probable. Yeah. Good. Okay. Let me end with a question. So you remember the end of 2 Chronicles? So 2 Chronicles 36 says, okay, all these things happened. The Assyrians came along, the Babylonians came along, all these things happened because God was at work in his people. And then along comes Cyrus, and God is at work in his people. And through God's inspiration and his own character, Cyrus produces that decree that allows the Hebrews to go home. That is, God was at work in all of this, and God continues to be at work in his people. Kings, the book of Kings, when it ends, leaves us with this big question mark. How could this disaster have happened? And is there any way to fix it? And it ends with Jehoiakim and this big question mark. He's sitting at the table of the king of Babylon. Will he be freed? Will he be able to restore the line of David, etc.? Chronicles is written after that question has been answered, and it has been answered in the negative. Right? Jehoiakim wasn't freed. Jehoiakim didn't go back. He didn't reestablish the line of David. What's up with that? Rather, the chronicler points us in a different direction. With the Persians now in control, is there any room for hope? Is there any room for hope? Now, if you read the last verses of Chronicles, it really ends on a hopeful note, doesn't it? Cyrus is saying, go back. It's okay. You can rebuild. But the bigger question is there any hope for the Hebrew people to get it right this time? They've been really good at getting it wrong. Is there any hope that they're going to get it right this time? To that question, we will turn after our break.
All right. We're going to take a 15-minute break. But first, I'd like to welcome everybody to the middle of the quarter. So you've made it to the middle of the quarter. And that means mid-quarter evaluations. So I just put a post on Facebook, so I'd like everybody to go on Facebook, which doesn't happen very often in class. But if everybody will go on Facebook right now and complete that evaluation before break. And I am going to also write a couple questions on the board that are specific to DBS. So you will need to fill out this evaluation before going on break, and also turn in these 3 questions before going on break. So we're going to do that real quick. So go ahead and go on Facebook, do that evaluation. It's on the Awaken DBS page. And I'll write these questions on the board. So after you finish that, you can do these questions. And you'll need a separate piece of paper or like a half sheet, whatever you fit the questions on. Mark. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
When you do the grading thing, don't do 40 people. I can't. I've got to do. No, I'm saying. Oh, yeah.
Okay, if we can, 2-minute warning, 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
You know, like.
Okay, if we can start making our way back to our seats, please.
You know, Dan had some good things to say last night. But did you even get there? No, we were at 7 p.m. And then I had to make dinner.
All right, everybody getting coffee. Let's come back to our seats. We're going to start. Is there anybody who still needs these questions before I erase them off the board? Okay. Is there anybody who's done with their evaluation that hasn't turned it in? I'm still missing 7. So if you have that, just give it to me by the end of class. Okay, so if you can just give it to me by the end of class, I still need 6. So. And if you need the questions, Pine and Abby took pictures of the board. So we'll hand it back over to Mark. Oh, yeah.
If you want your maps on the wall, please retrieve them. Otherwise, we'll probably just put them over in the corner there, piled up. As you finish your timelines this weekend, go ahead and put them on the walls. You can use any of the walls. I suggest using thumbtacks. We got plenty of thumbtacks over there because the tape and the sticky stuff, they tend to fall off. So use 2 thumbtacks and put your timelines so that way Monday morning we can all ooh and coo over everybody's hard work you've done. Okay, Mark, thank you so much.
As I've thought about the Book of Chronicles, the books of Chronicles, and their relationship to the books of Kings, and the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, here's a kind of simple way to get a handle on it. I like to do justice to complexity, so I like to look at the nitty-gritty details, but I also feel like it's important to kind of pull it back together and have a hook to hang something on. So I think here's kind of how I make sense of it, at least. Kings seems to be focused on the question, what went wrong? What went wrong? How do we explain what went wrong? That Jerusalem got destroyed, we got exiled, the temple got destroyed. Chronicles seems to sort of flip that on its head and seems to ask the question, how can we get it right? They're kind of 2 sides of the same coin, aren't they? But Kings is in a way diagnostic. What went wrong? Chronicles doesn't ignore that entirely, but Chronicles turns things around and said, how can we make it right? How can we as Hebrews not make the mistakes that got us into this trouble in the first place? How can we make things right with God? How can we reap the benefits by being the people of God who are going to be blessed by God? How do we do that? I would suggest that the Book of Chronicles gives a couple of pieces of guidance. How can we get it right? For one thing, genuine worship of God with joy under the leadership of the Levites. a lot of the prescription of the book of Chronicles is really, let's have a party. Let the Levites lead it. A party that honors God. Let's celebrate God's presence in our midst. Genuine worship in joy under the leadership of the Levites. Secondly, taking God's word seriously and responding to it. Not just the written word, like Josiah, but also the prophetic word. Thirdly, placing hope not in somebody like the historical David, because he was a man with lots of problems, but rather the ideal David. And here, I think, is the reason for the snipping that we saw with respect to David. The chronicler is simply not interested in the real David. The chronicler is interested in the ideal David. David at his best. Because David, genuine restoration of the people of Israel is not going to be done by the historical David. Genuine restoration of the people of Israel is going to be done by one like David. One who is the ideal David. One drawn from the line of David. Are you tracking with me?
Yes. Jesus.
Here is where we get the beginnings of the idea of the hoped for one. One who will be anointed as David had been anointed. One who will come from his line, and the word anointed in Hebrew is Mashiach, Messiah. With Chronicles, we're turning a corner. The kings have failed. And it doesn't look like kings in the future are going to succeed where the other ones failed. The only way we're ultimately going to get it right is to become like the ideal David, to follow the one who will come, who will guide us as the ideal David, HaMashiach, the anointed one. There's a beautiful picture. And this is just one of those moments. I have these moments when I'm studying the Bible. You ever have these moments where you're studying along and all of a sudden a light bulb goes on? Well, that's what happened to me when I saw that, in the spring when kings go to war and all of a sudden Bathsheba isn't there. I was like, whoa! A light bulb went on. And then, of course, I started asking questions. Why is this going on? Here's another one. Somebody read 1 Chronicles 17:1. 1 Chronicles 17:1. We're talking about David here. David's just been winning a whole lot of military victories. And we have 1 Chronicles 17:1. Somebody read it out loud.
When David was settled in his palace, he summoned Nathan the prophet. Look, David said, I'm living in a beautiful cedar palace, but the ark of the Lord's covenant is out there under a tent.
Yeah, did you notice that? So David's been winning all these victories. He's been building a beautiful palace for himself. He's now living in luxury and peace. He's got Jerusalem as his capital. He's got a lot of stature. And he turns to Nathan and he says, Nathan, I've been spending all this time making myself look better, making my life more comfortable, winning great victories. Yeah, it's been great, but the Ark of God is sitting in a tent. You ever feel like that? The thing about David, the thing that despite all his foibles makes David a man after God's own heart, is at least on occasion, he has these kinds of experiences, right? Where he stops and he takes stock and he says, oh crap. I've been devoting my life and my energy and massive amounts of resources to me. And I'm leaving God out in a tent. You ever do that? You ever spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to make your life better? How to solve your problems? How to have better relationships? How to be financially better off, more secure?